we make up 50%, a little actually more than 50% of the population. But I think almost all of us are drawn to the thing that we are passionate about because of our own experience. For me, it really came from my diagnosis of colitis first, kind of going down that road and all of a sudden learning like, oh, out of 10 people, 9 are women. I'm like, well, that's an interesting statistic for autoimmunity. And then you start looking at other risk factors, heart disease, Alzheimer's and dementia, 3 out of 4. And so the reality is we have such an enormous gap in women's health, and particularly around research and legitimate research. Women are just little tiny, longer-haired men. I don't play that. We're not bikinis. We are a full human, and we deserve our own research.
Agreed. What are we supposed to do about hormone issues and dysregulated hormones in a world where we're getting this onslaught of endocrine disruptors from the chemicals in our food, air, and water? How are we supposed to navigate that with hormone issues today?
So here's things. Like I'm obviously really, really logical. I've been in software before, engineering, obviously biochemistry. That was like my love language. The thing that never meshed for me was, okay, if we look at women as a whole, about 4 in 1,000 will have the risk for breast cancer over their lifetime. I'm going to use this as an example. But when you go through menopause, that starts to accelerate at this extraordinary rate, right? And then by the time you're about 85, it's 1 in 8. And so you go, okay, we've been told by conventional medicine, estrogen drives cancer. But yet, none of the studies that ever looked at hormone replacement in a woman ever showed that estrogen actually drove the increase of cancer. Not a single one has ever showed an increase in mortality. And so I looked at that and I go, okay, so let me do the logic thing. So if we have our hormones and they're cycling every month, up and down, and when you ovulate, your estrogen can go easily to 500. When you're second half of your cycle, it's easily 450. So we have a lot of estrogen. And it's okay to give you a birth control pill, but something magical happens at 50 and your hormones and any other hormones now going to kill you. And I'm like, but our breast cancer risk goes up, but we don't have any hormones. That doesn't make sense. That's not logical. So 22 years ago, we had a failed, horrible, poorly done study that keeps getting propagated out into the media. We took women off hormones. Did breast cancer rates go down? None of it actually went up. And we have greater incidences of heart disease, dementia, and osteoporosis from it. It defies logic to say that your hormone that your body makes suddenly becomes evil, villainous, and deadly at a magical number of 50-ish. It's the environmental chemicals. And here's my current hypothesis. This is the reason why I'm building what I'm building. My current hypothesis is when you don't have your own estrogen to attach that keyhole and turn it on, what do you think will do it? Your pesticides, your herbicides, your phthalates, your fragrances, all of that stuff. And if you look at it from a logical standpoint, it's also logical. Science. It's amazing.
What are the cries for help in each stage of life for a female?
If you look at very young girls, as we go into puberty, right, your ovaries are kind of figuring it out. And so you're getting kind of abnormal expulsion of hormones. So they're high, they're low, they're all over the place. You usually have crampy periods. Like everything's bad. I remember when I was a kid and I was like, being a woman sucks.
So hard.
I know. I was like, I don't like this.
The world is ending.
Yeah. I was like, this is terrible. What am I looking forward to? So you're in kind of hormonal chaos at that time. And then usually for most of us, it starts to normalize. We get our own cycle, which could be, 24 days to 32 days on average. And then, depending on your fertility, some women might have lower progesterone levels or higher androgens, fall into those categories of like PCOS, endometriosis. Those are all signs that the hormones are not balanced, right? Some of it genetic, but that doesn't mean you have to accept the genetics. It just means that there's some imbalances there. But I think the thing that most people get really confused by is the perimenopausal journey. We've told women that menopause is when it all happens. And that's a single day in your life. That's 1 year from the last time you had a menstrual cycle. That's the end of the perimenopausal season. But the average woman spends at least 8 years symptomatic. Remember, it's a bell curve, everybody. So that means some of us are outliers for 16, and some of us skate through with very few symptoms. And the lack of symptoms doesn't mean something's not going on, just means that you're not presenting those symptoms. If you look at it, you have kind of 3 stages. Early perimenopause, right, which usually means that your progesterone levels are starting to decline. Testosterone has already been sliding downhill from 20. It doesn't vary that much. It just keeps going downhill. But progesterone starts to decline, so usually you get crime scene periods, fibroids, heavy periods, more frequent periods. Like that was what was it for me. I was like, oh, awesome. I get to have a period every 21 days, and it's like a crime scene, So you're like, okay, never wear white, all the things you think about, how you address that time period relative to the midline where everything's starting to get crazy. So now progesterone is declining, and now estrogen has attached itself to a bungee cord. And so it's going up and down and up and down, up and down. Mm-hmm. So then you get hot flashes, night sweats, and brain fog, and, mood swings and rage and all the other sort of symptoms that can go with it, heart palpitations. What we do to address that will be different. So sometimes it's maybe putting progesterone in. Other times it might be putting progesterone and testosterone in. You know, as you enter that sort of last phase, the sort of last part of the chaotic period, what I always was afraid of, and I would say this is a disservice functional medicine does to the community, and some of it's because we're lacking the research, is I knew I was estrogen dominant. Anybody watching this can tell. I got a badonkadonk butt. I'm chesty. You know, if you're curvy, you had estrogen quite a bit. So I had been told, and I had had labs, you know, previously and all this time that said, you are estrogen dominant. So I'm like, okay, I'm terrified by estrogen. I couldn't possibly have it until the end. But when you get into that last chaotic period where it's all over the place, you can still have a period and it be very, very low. And nobody knows that. You think, oh, if I'm still having a period, I must still be estrogen dominant. I'm not there yet, so I can't start estrogen. And what I can tell you from my clinical experience and my own experience, I didn't do this with myself. I waited until it was all done, right, before I added estrogen because I was afraid I was going to get too much, is that you can often stabilize that bungee cord experience by stabilizing the estrogen with a little bit of replacement, depending on the person. Because the other thing, again, thinking logically, if you were a estrogen dominant woman, what do you think you have a lot of receptors for estrogen?
Yeah.
So who's going to feel it more profoundly when it starts to nosedive? Somebody who has a lot of receptors. And so we shouldn't take it away or be frightened of it when your body is actually crying for it. You have the different stages that you have to kind of look at, you know, and then you have to add the thyroid issues and the adrenal issues and all those other things. You can't ignore that.
I have so much discomfort around the whole hormone replacement industry.
Oh, yeah.
Anywhere where there's just a ton of money being made, I want people to have great discernment about what are the right decisions for them. What are the factors when you're considering different hormone replacement therapies? Which ones are more toxic? Which ones are more compatible with your body's own strategies and rhythms?
So the rule is if it's synthetic, like medroxyprogestin, birth control pills, IUDs, and things like that, you don't want those. Those are not long-term strategies for menopause, you know, perimenopause and menopause and beyond.
Why not? Why does that matter?
Oral estrogen. So the most commonly used oral estrogen for decades was Premarin. And Premarin is made from pregnant horses' pee. And it's got 13 estrogens in it. We only make 3. So all 13 of those estrogens, when you take them orally, go straight to the liver. They pass through those detox pathways where you got to be able to wrap the right wrapper in the right order. All of those have to go through that. Then you have to actually take it and then it goes out into the bloodstream and then starts to work. But it's not just those 13 estrogens. Now we have the other byproducts your liver made, some of which are really pro-inflammatory. And so in much older women, oral estrogen is associated with stroke and heart attack risk because of the metabolites, because it's given orally. So today, estrogen is generally given topically. There is a bioidentical form of estradiol in a pill. I'm still not a fan because again, it's going to go to the liver first because you swallowed it. And it's given as a patch or a cream or an oil or a pellet. Here's the reality. Pellets go underneath the muscle. They're tiny and they are bioidentical, but they have other ingredients in them that are going into your body. Your body creates a little capsule around it. It's a small surgical experience. Then your body's going to slowly absorb it. But that absorbability is just dependent on you individually, how much you exercise, your own unique biochemistry. And I have seen, we do pellets in our clinic, but it's begrudgingly. We make sure that it's moving in the right direction and it's not getting too high because over time it starts building. And then you have the patches. Well, the patches are great. They're bioidentical, but you've got an adhesive. So if you're a chemically sensitive person, do you want to stick an adhesive on you? Because they've got a bunch of polymers and other things in it that are endocrine disrupting. And then the compounded creams, in order for them not to separate, so it's kind of like if you put like mayonnaise out and let it sit, it would separate and be like oily and then chunky stuff on top. Well, they put all of these solvents in it, so it'll stay in solution. Well, those solvents are endocrine disrupting. A lot of women will say, well, I was taking this cream and it seemed to work, but this one doesn't. I'm like, it's the base, right? It's probably not the hormone, it's the base. We use a bioidentical hormone and jojoba oil, 2 ingredients, that's it. Jojoba oil is a waxy-like oil. It absorbs rapidly to the skin and delivers without having any excipients in it. That took a long time to get to. We have to think about where we're taking it and how we're taking it. Same thing with testosterone. Testosterone is not actually FDA approved for women in female doses. So if you go to a conventional or a Menopause Society trained doctor, they're gonna give you androgel, which is dosed for a man, then they're gonna go guess and put a little bit on. And then they poo-poo compounded, but again, if it's compounded in cream, you are putting on a cream that's got solvents in it. We obviously do the jojoba oil. We have to look at it and say, I don't want to take hormones that are adding additional endocrine disrupting things.